Hi, and welcome to July 22nd's Global VC Sports and Sport Hiatus Office Hours. Thrilled to have a really exciting, fun panel to talk about the explosion of sport collectibles, the renaissance, the resurgence. Insert your synonym here, but certainly a exciting time to be a collector. We've got a tremendous panel, and I want to get out of the way quickly so that these guys can talk about so many things that are going on in our worlds. For those of you who are new, I wanted to quickly give a background of why we're here and what this is all about, and we'll get into our discussion. So about 9 years ago, we launched New York Venture Community Sports, NYVC Sports. The intent was to bring together all the entrepreneurs, all the investors, and all the sports executives who, quite frankly, were living in three different worlds. The entrepreneurs were doing hackathons and at schools and in various environments. The investors were meeting at retreats and probably slightly nicer environments. And the sports executives were meeting up at Jewel events and at Sports Business Journal conferences. And those three communities weren't really communicating. The biggest exit at the time was eBay buying StubHub and GSI. And I met Deepan Parikh, and he was starting a company at General Assembly, and we were meeting with an investor at the time. And the thought was these three groups should just be communicating because we're all better by having more information and more knowledge about how each of us are living in this world. So the thought was, let's create an event. We'll see what happens. And now we're 9 years later. We're in New York, Boston, San Francisco, and London. Or we were, I should say, way back when there were these things called events. I hope there are these things called events again at some point soon. In the meantime, we are virtual. So on March 12th, the day after Adam intelligently shut down the NBA and put sports on hiatus, we launched sporthiatus.com with the intent of celebrating all the good, all the innovation, all the positivity, creativity, et cetera, going on in our space. So I appreciate your being here. Thank you to this number of people that are working with me in the background. I happen to be the face of it, but there are a lot of people live blogging. So along the side of the screen, you'll see live blogging, tweeting, polls, sentiment analysis. You can ask questions along the bottom for this incredible crew. We are all over Twitter, so and other environments, but at Sport Hiatus, at Global VC Sports. Each of Kenny and Jeff and Katie and Phil's Twitter handles are promoted as well. So please feel free to connect and promote these guys as well. So thank you guys for being here. We put a fun little thing in the corner of our screen called Tip Jar. So that's how we fund some of this stuff. So feel free to help out there as well. But beyond that, this is an incredible crew that needs very little introduction. I've watched Kenny for years on SportsCenter as a Bostonian. You probably can tell behind me. I've watched Phil for years, sometimes not as enjoyably as I would like to, and now enjoyably through his YouTube channel and all the things that are going on around breaking. I've known Jeff for a while through his incredible work in Topps, both physical cards and digitally, and Katie with all the great work that you're doing around CryptoKitties and so much more. So with that, I'm going to get out of the way. Let the four of you be on screen by yourselves. I'm here to help and along the way. But if you have questions or anything that you want to ask this group, we will feed it to Kenny, and Kenny can share it with this panel. So enjoy. Kenny, take it away. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we were grilling here last night, and I couldn't get the burner to start, so I used a rare Honus Wagner card. It was a great steak in the end, but that might have been an error. Some of you experts on this can tell me. No, I'm happy to be a part of this. So a little background why I'm involved, because of Jeff at Topps. I'm hopefully creating new collectibles, even while everybody else is collecting old collectibles. Way back when, goodness gracious, I'm old. The Seattle Pilots. Anybody ever heard of them? So they were a team that lasted 1 year. They later would become the Milwaukee Brewers after that 1 year. And so, of course, I grew up in south of Seattle and used to carry a Tommy Harper card in my back pocket in Little League. That was my inspiration out there. He was my favorite player, led the American League in stolen bases. And about the same time, just like in the old days, we didn't have electronics. We had one phone, one TV, newspaper showing up. A little different than the modern era we're all in. There was no Zoom. And my uncle Bud and I were just sitting down at the kitchen table and just started making up a game. We were trying to play baseball. It was probably raining out. Let's play card baseball. We'll grab a deck of cards. We started making up rules. Jack's a single, queen's a double, et cetera, et cetera. And I played that pretty much all my life with friends, with family. And about a year ago, Jeff, or 2 years ago, or a year and a half, whatever it was, I came to Topps with this idea. I said, hey, I have a thing that could be made both a game to play and something of a collectible, because each playing card will have a face of a player, either current or old. And we just put it out right before Christmas, a little late. We're kind of doing a re-emphasis right now. And in fact, tonight, the best celebrity softball player in the history of celebrity softball, Tony Todd, an actor, he was in Black Panther, a whole bunch of other things. He and I play a game that we'll be seeing. We tape recorded it the other day. It's going to be on the YouTube, Topps YouTube channel at 8 Eastern tonight, so people can see how the game is played. Jeff can probably speak to this better if young kids are actually looking at this as true collectibles or looking at it more as a game. But I want to start, usually ladies first, but I want to start with the guy who just had a baby, our pitcher, Phil, who was an all-star. What year was that, 2010?
10, yep, 2010.
I think he won 18 games that year.
I did.
And he took everything he earned in Major League Baseball and just bought a crazy amount of baseball trading cards now. Is that what have you done with your life? Truly.
Basically, yeah. Well, the game that you're describing sounds a lot like Pokemon cards, which is also pretty near and dear to me. I'm a big Pokemon fan and collector.
We did not rip off Pokemon. Just never heard of that game.
But so I stopped playing in 2018 and decided that I was very into sports still, and very into sports cards, and also quite a big fan of gambling, which if you look at basically all of those things together, you find trading cards. And so I got into cards that I had been a fan of since I was a little kid, and figured what kind of platform could I create that kind of gives a different perspective on things. Someone that not only play the game, but has knowledge of trading cards, and bring that to an audience that maybe has never seen anything like that before. So that's how I kind of got into the game, and I've been making YouTube videos ever since, and for about 9 months I've found a pretty good following there on YouTube. So it's been kind of a fun transition. I get to do it from home, get to spend time with my family, and also do something that I'm pretty passionate about.
It's funny you brought up the note about gambling, how well like the horse tracks have done during this coronavirus. So many of them, they all shut down, and then a few started up, and now everybody's doing it as close to what is normal without fans, and the handles would go up, these little tracks all over. But there was a time, and it wasn't that long ago, where we had these rules at ESPN on SportsCenter. You never mention, especially the NFL shows, couldn't even acknowledge that anybody ever had fantasy football money. It was just for fun, those fantasy leagues,
Sure.
And then I don't even know what the tipping point was, but somewhere somebody smarter a few years ago was like, let's just live in reality. We're not telling people to go gamble, away their mortgage, but we're acknowledging that people do like to have action on games, makes it a little more interesting. And now we have Daily Wager. We have a nightly gambling show, so really the tables completely turned with regard to that. Katie, have you seen people betting a lot of pretend money, crypto money? I mean, it's not
Real
pretend.
money.
It's not, you can't hold it in your hand. Is that what people are doing with it, or what are they doing with that money the most of?
So first I'll say that I was at ESPN many years ago and participated in non-monetary units of fantasy football and other fantasy. So near and dear to my heart there. We're seeing, we don't look at it as gambling. We look at it more as an investment. And I think what you described about the game that you've created in a physical world is actually almost a perfect mirror for what we've created in a digital world with NBA Top Shot. And so people are spending real money, sometimes crypto, sometimes with a credit card, to purchase the digital kind of equivalent to trading cards, except far more multimedia. You can't put video easily into a cardboard trading card. And so we're kind of packaging all those things up and re-envisioning what that looks like online, but very similar. They're collectibles, they're game pieces. People are spending real money on it. Some of it is speculative. Some of it is people love collecting stuff, but it's kind of all intertwined with what's happening in the physical world.
For the record, I also tell my wife it's investing as well. So I'll just put that out there.
and blame it on the horse. By what means does somebody take what's crypto and make it, you know, a physical bill, or at least something that goes to a bank? Like, what is the conversion point? I don't really get that part of it, and I'm admitting my I'm a little naive about all this, how it works.
Yeah, so the only thing that that people need to know about crypto and the products that we build is that it ensures that they actually own the thing they own. So it's not like taking a picture of something on the internet and saying, here, I own this thing. It's the blockchain is literally just a notebook. It's like a public notebook that anybody can write in, and that is verifiable. So if I say I gave you my most prized Sabonis moment in NBA Top Shot, that gets logged on the ledger, and then everybody can see Katie has given this to Kenny. They can see it's left my wallet and entered your wallet. And then if you decide to go and sell that back to Sabonis himself, they can see how that transaction travels. But it's very much the same thing as a physical trading card, where it has value to it. There's scarcity. So we can't just unlimited print things. There are kind of rules that are set on blockchain that don't allow us to print, you know, unlimited numbers of things. And that creates a lot of the same scarcity, verifiable authenticity, all of those things that happen in the real world, and showcasing fandom in a place where frankly people spend more time sometimes than the real world. You think about, I think about my woman cave, which is full of jerseys and trophies and awards. And I have a coffee table book I made of every New York Rangers game I've ever been to until they stopped printing tickets. Nobody can see those things. Those are just for me to kind of have my own love for, but people can see my Top Shot collection, and they can see all of the different players that I've collected. They can see my massive showcase of Euro stars. They can understand my fandom in a digital place.
Jeff, besides touching on how my 52 card baseball game revolutionized things over at Topps, during this pandemic, I mean, no one was rooting for it. We all want things to normalize again, but everybody was trying to stay in business, right? ESPN tried to stay in business. Gas stations tried to stay in business, right? There was no sin in continuing to do what you do. And in a weird way, did it almost benefit because people had more time to sit at home? Oh yeah, I like trading cards. I'm going to invest more time than I had otherwise.
Yeah, I think you're right, Kenny. I mean, we were nervous, like a lot of businesses, with everything that was going on with the pandemic and, you know, the lockdown and shutting down retail, where we sell a lot of our products in hobby shops, Walmarts, Targets, all throughout the country. Yeah, so we weren't really sure what to make of it. I manage our online business. So, you know, as long as the factories and distribution centers stayed open, we could be in business, but we weren't really sure what to make of it, and we're real nervous. But you're right. The trading card market was really red hot before the pandemic, and it's weird to say, but it's really even gotten hotter since it happened. And I think some of the, you know, the factors are, you know, if you think about it, make sense with having to do social distancing, with being in lockdown or quarantines. Trading cards are a great activity that you can do with your family, with yourself. Now with things like YouTube, which Phil is doing, or social media, you can post and share a lot of the different cards you get with your family and friends. You know, people are, as we've talked about, investing. People are using trading cards as an investment. So eBay's still open, places like that, where there are secondary markets. So I think, you know, all those factors, and probably the last one, which kind of goes into your game, is nostalgia, right? Baseball cards and trading cards in general have been around for years and years and years. So people have looked for activities and things to keep them engaged and try and have some fun without live sports and without a lot of activities to go to physically. People have rediscovered their trading card collections, and whether they've gone out and bought new trading cards or just used their old ones to, you know, kind of re-engage with family and friends, that's what we've seen.
I have a question.
That's another thing that I've kind of found in comments that my YouTube page gets, and that's basically all these people. You know, I expected the hardcore collectors to kind of gravitate towards this. But what I found is there's so many people coming back into the game that just want something to connect with their kids. They want something that was nostalgic to them, that's going to, you know, then bring them something to share with either, you know, family members or, you know, children they have. And, you know, I think that's really, you know, combine that with the people that were already involved in cards, and then take that to the next level with, this wave of people that have, free time and, a bunch of more time at home with their kids than they were probably used to, and having something to connect with them. So it's really been, a boom in so many different ways.
I have a question for Phil and Jeff, actually. Jeff, we take a lot of inspiration from the work that you guys do, for sure. We love the 2020 series.
Thanks.
But YouTube is such an important part of collecting and the community around collecting. Phil, you have your own channel. Jeff, like, we are super inspired by even what hobby shops are doing with breaks, and all of these different things that get people involved even when they can't be physically on location. How important has that become for building the community around trading cards, especially physical trading cards, when you kind of can't meet up to do that anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Phil speak to it in a second, but what we've seen is this, it's kind of, we call it case breaking. And, it's a phenomenon and trend that happened before the pandemic, but it's really a way for people to enjoy trading cards without having to, buy a whole box or get a whole pack. Part of the allure and fun of trading cards has always been that chase, that excitement. You don't know what card you're getting. At the same time, you have favorite players. Some of them are probably Phil Hughes fans, or teams or Yankees. So if you open a pack of Topps cards, a lot of time there's joy in the unexpected, but you could finish it and say, like, I'm a Chicago White Sox fan. It's like, oh, I really want a Lewis Robert card, and I've opened a pack and I didn't get one. You can do these case breaks where you can buy into, and Phil probably explains it way better and with a lot more information than I can give. You can buy by players, by teams, just kind of like a fantasy draft where you get like a certain position and you just open them. And guys like Phil are so entertaining that you can sit on YouTube or social media all night and watch these amazing case breaks and see things where people are pulling cards that are worth thousands, if not tens of thousands of cards. And it's not only new products. I'm seeing a lot of things with people that are pulling and opening vintage products. So basketball vintage is huge. Some of the 80s stuff with Michael Jordan cards, 90s, chrome and finest baseball has been really hot. So, if you can get your hands on some of those old cases and watch those case breaks, they're fascinating.
I once had Ken Griffey Jr.'s autograph on a wiffle ball, but over time, unfortunately, we signed it in some kind of felt marker. And now you might just see part of the exterior of the part of the scribble. But if I know it really happened and I can testify to that, is that worth anything, Phil?
If you can say it was Kenny Mayne touched, yeah, for sure.
Well,
and that's actually,
I'm sorry, I was going to say, it's funny because like with coin collecting, right, mint condition is like the top. I mean, do you grade it that way with cards? Is there a name for the top condition?
Yeah, there definitely is. So there's grading systems. There's a few different companies that do grading, but typically it's 1 through 10. 10 is mint. And as you started the whole show off with your quib on Hannes Wagner, certainly vintage cards, grading is crazy important in vintage cards, but also the more modern cards. So some of the things that Phil opens on his YouTube channel it is very important. Some of these companies, PSA is probably the most popular. Beckett, everyone remembers the Beckett card guy they used to open. They have a grading service. There's a few other companies that do grading as well, but a graded card tends to be worth more than something that's not graded.
But I would say slightly used adds to the authenticity of something old. Who the hell would have something from 1903 that looks like it just came out of the package, unless it stayed in the package?
Well, you'd be a very wealthy man if you could find something like that. But yeah, condition is so important with vintage, and I don't really get into vintage as much, but it's a crazy world, especially with the grading stuff. I mean, vintage is held to a different standard than modern, but nowadays and I actually posed this question on Twitter last night, and that was, if you could find the technology to basically grade cards electronically, with lasers or scanners or however you wanted to do it, and take the human element out of it. And I got so many people that were like, well, you're pro robo-ump, aren't you? And I think it'd be silly to kind of ignore the fact that we have this technology, and why not utilize it? And it comes to kind of a nostalgia standpoint, I guess, but what's the disadvantage in utilizing things that we already have to kind of make things better? And, you know, it was an interesting question and I got a lot of different answers to it, but I certainly think that grading cards, you know, it's definitely possible to do, to take advantage of technology in that way.
On the mint kind of thread there, it's interesting that in a digital space, there is still the concept of mint condition. There's still the concept of original ownership and the concept of secondary ownership and tracking that ownership along the way. And for digital assets, like we call the cards in our game moments because they are video based and they're kind of like a snapshot in time. But your moments could be mint, or they could have been owned by a player. They could have been owned by Kenny Mayne. They could have been kind of pre-owned. And part of what's interesting about the blockchain layer is that it automatically tracks that. So there's no question of provenance. You already know who's pre-owned that. And so some people, I think it's really a question of what do collectors want, right? Like to your point, Phil, about people not wanting a robot to grade their cards. There's something about the human element. Some people want a robot, some people won't. Some people want something gently used. Some people want something mint. There's kind of like this, these different personas and different psychologies to collecting, which are really interesting.
The one thing I will say, being in you know, for a manufacturer and a trading card company, everyone wants 10s. Everyone expects 10s, and there wouldn't be a grading system if everything graded out 10s. So, you know, at Topps, we're not involved in grading. We certainly know condition matters to collectors that just hold the cards or collectors that are looking to sell them on eBay or other places and marketplaces. So, you know, grading has become, Phil, you can probably attest to this, I'd say even more important. I've been at Topps for almost 9 years. It gets more and more important even with modern cards.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the biggest complaints I see, and that's not just from Topps, but from all companies, is centering and the cuts on cards. And, you know, you look at basically, and I think it's a good thing that not all cards are cut perfectly, because, you know, if every card that comes out of a pack's a 10, what's the point of grading, you know, almost to an extent. And then, so with modern, yeah, it's definitely, you know, one of those things where all you want is a 10. And if it's a 9, you're kind of disappointed. But it sounds like from Kenny's perspective, he almost wants there to be like a story to a vintage card. You know, if he found, you know, a Mickey Mantle that was still in the pack, it's like, well, this card doesn't really have a story. You know, it sat in somebody's, you know, basement, which is kind of a cool story in itself. But this wasn't on some kid's spoke. This wasn't, you know, handed down from, you know, generations to the next person. So there's definitely like the line, and I don't know where it necessarily is now, whether it's, you know, 50s to 60s, but there's two way different perspectives of collecting, whether it's, you know, modern and vintage. And I think people on the vintage side of it just love the fact that they're holding a piece of history.
It's like there's a Pearl Jam lyric about that, like all these rusted signs we ignore, choosing shiny ones instead. You know that song? Mm-hmm. So I got a question, like maybe for all three of you, on an autograph on top of something. Does that always increase it, or would somebody argue, no, wait a minute, you took the purity of what it was without the, you know what I'm saying? Does the autograph immediately enhance it, or would some people view, no, I don't want the autograph. I want to have the clean card that it was?
I think from Topps' standpoint, we've seen that we've done autographs. I would say in almost all cases, it increases the value and the desire to own that card, because there's a couple different ways people can autograph things in trading cards. They can do a physical, we call it a hard signed autograph, where you're signing the card so you know the player sat down, signed it. Or you can do stickers, right, where we have the player sign a sheet of stickers and then they send the stickers back to our facility. We put them on cards. The hard signed, or the on card autos as we call them, are certainly much more valuable. But the industry has moved much more, almost melding with memorabilia. So whether it's autographs or game used items, those usually are in a little bit more demand than regular cards. Although we do have some chrome cards, and there's some other companies that have other cards that you could say, the way that they're constructed and manufactured, that those have some value and some scarcity built into them. But yeah, in almost all cases, autographs have more value.
And
I think what Jeff's talking about is you know, certified autographs, where I think, Kenny, you are kind of referring to a card that you've had in your collection, yeah, and that you're trying to get signed by the guy, yeah, in person. Yes. From that aspect, it can sometimes decrease the value. which sounds crazy, but you have this card and you've worked so hard to find the, an opportunity to get the guy to sign it. And then all of a sudden your card, is maybe $100 card and somebody's willing to pay, $20, $30 for it online because they don't know, they don't have that certificate of authenticity that you didn't just sign that yourself. And so I think that the modern era of autographed cards has kind of moved to a space where the player signed it because it's certified from Topps or from whoever it was. Whereas if you get an autograph in person on something, it might mean a lot to you, but doesn't necessarily mean it's worth more in the secondary market.
Well, who's to always are there a certain number of experts that judge? For instance, my wife and I have a foundation, and I'm going to plug it. It's called runfreely.org. And we are buying braces for veterans so they can run again. I have a ruined ankle from football. I got mine and we started the foundation. Our last veteran just yesterday, so we're proud of that. But anyway, we did some fundraising ideas. And one of them, I had purchased a Mickey Mantle signed baseball at some other event. And I put it up on Twitter and people, made a bid for it. And there was somebody who was like, that's not real. Notoriously, there were a bunch of fake Mickey Mantles out there back in the day. But then Keith Olbermann, he jumped in. He's somewhat of an expert on all that. He said, no, it's legit. I've seen him. I've had, literally in person seen it. So he said it was a good one. But my point is there were a whole bunch of people on the internet arguing good autograph, bad autograph. How does somebody get to the bottom of finding out if it's real without the certificate of authenticity?
So they're the same companies that grade cards for condition will also certify autographs based on, their expertise, I guess you could say. And so you could send that, that card that you got autographed in person into one of these, PSA Beckett's, and they will certify that card as being
Like
authentic.
a jeweler, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there are companies that will do it. It's just a matter of whether all that time and money and effort is worth the value that it's going to gain, which in the case of a Mickey Mantle baseball is a significant amount of value.
Yeah.
But if somebody, came up to me and had me sign a card in person, it wouldn't be worth the trouble of having it verified that it's authentic. It's just, maybe means something to that person.
I remember being at an all-star game. I used to play in the little celebrity softball thing, and some little kid, he must have been desperate. He's asking me to sign his baseball. And before I did, I looked at it. He literally had like Willie Mays, Henry Aaron, Ozzie. I said, dude, give me a scrap of popcorn paper, son. I'm not ruining this for you. You'll appreciate this 20 years from now when you're holding that. So I wanted to ask Katie, sorry to interrupt earlier. You're up in Vancouver, BC, beautiful part. You've been over to Vancouver Island some?
I actually haven't yet.
Oh, come on.
I know, I gotta go.
All right. And then come down to the Puget Sound ones if you can get back and forth. That's a whole nother question. Do the Canadians, hockey lovers, do they feel hockey gets kind of short shrift in all this card trading, or am I wrong? And it's those who love hockey get enough of hockey?
No, I think that they feel pretty good about it. I think that hockey fans are a rabid bunch. I spent a couple years with the league in New York, so had a lot of time to spend with those fans. And I mean, I think they don't look at their sport as more or less. My favorite sport is hockey. Hockey's the best sport on the planet. Sorry, Phil.
I agree.
So
100%.
there's that. But no, I think that they collect as well. There's the same structure where Gretzky cards, Lemieux cards are going to be incredibly valuable. If those have provenance, they have more value. If that provenance is verifiable, that has more value. So I think it's kind of the same across all sport. If you think about the psychology of sports fandom, the story, we keep talking about the story behind that card. Maybe the story is personal to you of having gone into the corner store and bought a pack and got miraculously this rare thing, or the story is that you went and you found something that was verifiably signed, and that is important to you as well. So it's really about collecting. I'm going to be like weird future lady again and talk about the digital version of this, which is there's definitely a desire to have a connection with athletes. And we see that even through, we're in a beta with NBA Top Shot now. We see that with the feedback that we're getting from early users. We get asked constantly, even about digital signatures, which increase the value, which seems like, well, a player never even necessarily touched this, but just that signature, that connection matters to people. And we're looking at different digital ways that we can make that provenance even more interesting. So imagine if when you go to a game, there's actually a technology where the player's thumbprint gets you a special kind of signature, and then that verifies that you actually met the player and they actually signed it. All of these things can kind of be automated. I know the NFLPA is super interested in the authenticity of memorabilia, and they're exploring all sorts of digital channels for that. But biometrics can help. This kind of like verifiable log on something like a blockchain can help. So there's kind of interesting ways to do that, even when you're talking about digital assets that a player may not have touched that physical card because it's not physical, it's a three-dimensional digital object. But you can still talk about that connection between you and a player. You can talk about that connection between you and your fandom.
Just real quickly to add to that, sorry, Kenny, but from a digital standpoint, we have apps where it's all just digital collecting, and we do baseball. We've got a hockey one called Skate, and there is a lot of demand and value in getting digital signatures, believe it or not. And, the athlete will sign it on an iPad and we'll film it. And there are a lot of collectors that loved the idea of that digital autograph and that closeness that they can get to the digital copy of that card. So yeah, that is something that we see in sort of our digital trading card space.
I don't know.
Well, it saves a bunch of room, right? Like my wife would love if my cards didn't take up half the garage. And there's something definitely to be said about that. Yeah. So it's an interesting concept. And I think, as time goes on, it's definitely one that you'll see a lot more of.
Jeff, I don't know if you've seen, there's a company out of the UK doing digital cards as well. I think they're called Fanatic, but with TEC at the end. But what they did was they did green screen sessions with players where they did a big physical signature with their hand, and you can see that play out on the screen. So it really connects that athlete and signature piece in an interesting way. I think it's one of the best ones I've seen.
Yeah, that's cool. I've not seen that one, but I mean, you talked about it earlier with cryptos, the fact that you can embed video and more live things from players. That's what we've seen with our digital collectibles as well, is you can film the session of them signing it. It can be a little thumbnail you click on, and you can see the player signing it. We've incorporated video with Major League Baseball and with NHL. So it's like, we do in Tops Now, which is our real-time cards. Whereas, on Thursday night when baseball comes back and the Nationals play the Yankees and there's, something big that happens in the game, we'll do cards the next day, and they're physically printed and shipped to customers in 3 to 5 days. But the idea of doing it digital, and let's say it's a walk-off home run and you can show the video and then finish it with the celebration at home plate, there's something really powerful in that. So, physical and digital are combining much more in trading cards. They are separate in some ways, but, those coming together is really powerful.
That was actually going to be a question I had, is how do you kind of take those purist collectors, those people that, want, physical cards in their hand? How do you kind of entice them to cross over a little bit into that digital marketplace?
I think you touched on it earlier, Phil. I think a little bit of a part of it is the digital space probably skews a bit younger. So, we see more kids and even teenagers, as they have phones and mobile devices. So, for them, their whole life is on mobile devices. So for them to open a digital pack, it makes a lot of sense. So we see a lot of fathers and mothers and uncles and grandfathers engaging with their kids digitally on some of our apps. But, I think if you can replicate some of the physical experiences on digital, which nowadays I think you can, and Katie can probably speak to it with a little bit more knowledge or expertise than I can even, but it's like, you almost replicate a pack opening experience where the pack, opens and you have the tearing or the wax pack coming apart, and you see the cards one by one, and you have some rarity that we've introduced into some of our apps. So we've tried to make it an experience which goes across generations to, generations like my father that collected, to people like my son who are 7 years old. Trading cards, there's very few people that don't know the name Topps. And I will say more and more people have started to collect in the last 8 years. But when I first started at Topps in 2012, a lot of the questions I got was like, oh, trading cards, cool. I remember doing those as a kid, but what are you guys up to? I haven't really been involved in that. I think the trends and, people my age having kids and getting back into it with their kids have really kind of accelerated people really getting back into the marketplace.
What you described about the pack opening is very much our pack opening experience. If anybody who's listening wants to go check out the product, just DM me on Twitter. I think that they've shared our Twitter information. I'm happy to give people access to our beta. The only thing we're missing is chewing gum. Honestly, we have the same kind of experience. You're opening, there's tearing, there's a discovery process to it. We're like doing breaks on Discord where people are coming in and we're doing kind of random slotting, which is super fun. We've actually done some internal breaks too in our testing process. It's just the whole community around collecting trading cards is really fun. And we have many collectors, probably of your products, Jeff, within our digital groups who are just excited about new ways to showcase their fandom, to collect things that they love, to maybe pair that with something they care about. I mean, there are a lot of people who hold cryptocurrency. It seems like crazy and fringe, but like millions and millions of people have looked at this as an investment, have maybe looked at it as gambling, Kenny. And so the crossover of the demographic of people who love trading cards and the demographic of people who hold cryptocurrency is actually like that Venn diagram has a lot of coverage.
I think you're definitely right on that, Katie. We definitely see that, and it's a space we've been studying for a couple years. And our Garbage Pail Kids brand, which I'm sure a lot of people watching and you guys are familiar with, that's a Topps. Yeah, Topps. That's a Topps intellectual property that we own. We partner with a company called Wax, where we use their blockchain and issued some of the original Garbage Pail Kid cards or stickers from the 1985 series. So, of course, I think there's a huge crossover between blockchain, digital, crypto, and regular trading cards. And I'd be remiss if I didn't really quickly comment on gum, because as my time on Topps, there's not a time when I speak publicly or talk to people where they talk about the gum. Everyone has such fond attachment to the gum, but Topps got rid of it probably.
It had that chalk on the outside.
Got rid of it probably in the mid 2000s because, first of all, it doesn't taste great. Second of all, it leaves that film on cards. So as cards became more investments, people would open a pack and be like, oh gosh, I got this gum film on the back of our card. So we've looked to bring it back, due to FDA and some other things. We haven't brought it back with just the pink film and the gum. Even though we own Bazooka Joe and some other things, we've done some sort of collaborations where we've had Bazooka Joe. But I mean, there's not a time when I don't get asked about gum, and it just makes me laugh because people used to hate it. Now they love it. And maybe it's that whole nostalgia thing.
Kenny would love it, right? You like gently used memorabilia.
I used to love the gum. It had that chalkiness, but I understand what he's saying. It probably did a little bit of film damage, to the card. All right. They sent in a bunch of questions, which I'm going to get to after. I got two other quick ones. Oh no, maybe I've forgotten one of them. What we're talking about it under the construct of olden day and modern day, but official cards, official things that were made by official companies. What about the value of more random things? And I know, I think Phil touched on, we don't have the authenticity letter. Something you met so-and-so at an event and he or she signed this really cool thing, whether it was a poster, like I went to college at UNLV and we used to get to usher the fights, and we didn't, there's not an NCAA violation because we didn't get paid. So we could get tips, but so I met Muhammad Ali by pure chance. He came around one corner and I was like, it's Muhammad Ali. And he was kind enough to talk for a minute, and he signed this little scrap I had, which was actually an invitation to a post party at Caesar's Palace. So it has kind of a cool thing on it to begin with. And there's Muhammad Ali. Is that worth anything?
Well, it's worth something. It's worth something to you, right?
I'm not trying to peddle it right now. I'm just asking. we keep talking about these cards that were printed and made by a big company and they're mints and all, but don't random items of significant artistic value have some worth? Is it like a house? If one guy buys it, it's worth that.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, worth and value is a very tricky subject when it comes to these things because it can be, both secondary market value or personal value. I would assume that, something like that means a lot more to you because you got it in person than it necessarily means.
I'm not selling it. Don't even try.
Exactly. And that's the point. Like that means a lot more to you than you could, throw it up on eBay and get, $150 for it. And I think that's what kind of brings a lot of people back to the physical card aspect, is that they can touch it, they feel it, they look at it. It's, you know, it's in their office, it's hanging in their, you know, their man caves, their woman caves. And it's something that just really means a lot to you, even though, you know, if you threw it up on eBay, you know, you'd get $50 for it and you'd be like, oh, great, that's cool. So I think there's, you know, there's big value, and you're seeing big value in, you know, I think there was a LeBron James RPA that sold for 1.8 million the other day. And then there's value in things that just mean something to the beholder, you know, and I think that still is a very important part of this, is, you know, kind of the emotional connection that you have with things.
There's also the flip side of that, though, where like I come from kind of traditional sports and marketing and media, so this collector world is new to me, and like some of the things I'm saying are probably super obvious to you, Phil and Jeff, but are like extremely fascinating to me, that people have like a thesis sometimes about collecting. So if there's somebody with a thesis that they're looking for something from that year that was signed by Muhammad Ali, like that actually may increase the value to it. Or if someone's thesis is that they collect casino memorabilia, and because it was Caesar's Palace and it was signed, it holds much more value to them. Like there's all of these interesting things that attribute value, but it's, to Phil's point, it's all about what a person finds important. So it might be important to you because it's a great memory, but it might be important to that person I'm describing because they're trying to finish their collection. Yeah.
It's a good point, Katie. Yep.
I'm going to get to these questions, but wait, I had one quickie one, Phil. I just, last week, or maybe it was 10 days ago, the Madden ratings came out, and you heard all these NFL guys are mad. They got a 79 or 84, whatever, you know. So when you got your picture taken for your baseball card that was being sold, was there a time where you're like, why did they use that picture? Like, were you ever upset how you were portrayed, both pictorially or any of the information didn't give you the cool stats? Or
yeah, for sure, 100%. I mean, there's certainly a lot of cards that I like, and there's a few cards that I think are, you know, a bit unflattering. But yeah, I mean, we have no choice in that, as you know. It's kind of one of those things, like anybody can take a photo, and then as long as you've signed over the right to use your image on any trading card that year, they're free to make you look as good or as bad as they want to. So yeah, there's some that I enjoy that are cool, and then there's others, like people bring it up to me and I'm like, oh yeah, that card, that's the card.
Real quickly, Kenny, to add on that, we have an editorial team that goes and looks at all the cards. So certainly, you know, you try and get, you know, action shots or portray the players and then the teams in the best possible light, but sometimes there's just funny pictures or certain things that, you know, it's hard not to depict on cards. And because cards are really a snapshot in time and they go back for tops to 1951, there's so many cool and unique images. And we used to have our own photography group that would go to all the games and spring training. So you got things like Johnny Bench in some random field in Florida and in our Tops vault. So it's, yeah, I mean, and it's funny. Sometimes players will come to us and they'd be like, why are you using that image? And be like, oh no, we think it's kind of cool. And they'll be like, no, it's terrible. And, you know, and then other players, you know, don't care as much. Some players are very vocal about it. Now with social media, you have a lot more back and forth interaction. So, you know, I'm sure you guys are all aware, error cards, if Tops ever does make an error, I mean, they're found out right away and people get pretty vocal about it. And sometimes the players will be like, how did you mess this up about me? And you're like, oh gosh, you know, they live in infamy.
You want to find those are right. The rarity of a big mistake on it. By the way, I think somebody already made an offer on the Ali card, just so you know. So that's already moving up.
You're starting a little bidding war here.
It said, Kenny, to me, favorite tagline, and can I hear it? We hear it, please. I think they mean like a catchphrase, I guess, like on SportsCenter. Who knows? I try to make new stuff. There's the old things that we've said through the years that just pop in your head and you just spit it out. Let me think. I always liked understating to be funnier than overstating. So I'd say a guy would do a huge, or a girl, a huge accomplishment, and instead of, you know, regaling them with all sorts of praise, just say he's going to get his name in the paper. Kind of, yeah. So it didn't work for everybody here today, but that's all right. Not everybody had a paper growing up. But see, if it was in the paper, that was a big deal. I used to.
No, that was one of my favorites actually of yours was he's gonna have his name in the paper. It's like he just had some crazy accomplishment and you're like, yeah, somebody's gonna write about that.
but the funny part is, as old as I am, that used to be a big thing. That'd be like, cool, your name's in the paper. So I had some friends from Montana. They still live out there. Native American reservation way out in eastern Montana, and every time they would come to town, I would call the Seattle PI and put on my big man voice and give him a hole-in-one at some golf course. So he'd come to town, open the paper, and he'd hit a hole-in-one the day before. I finally got caught at the end. They're like, where's the course? And I was like, Kenmore. And the guy's like, I live in Kenmore. There's no such course. So that ended my run. This person just asked to speak about my time with Stuart Scott. He would have been 55 just the other day. I still trade notes with his daughters, Tay and Sid. And yeah, he's sorely missed, obviously. I mean, he was a good friend, not just, on the air, but talk about old school. Stuart and I, on Sundays, we'd watch the NFL games and we would play electric football. Probably half the audience never even heard of it. It was like a big aluminum board with these tiny little plastic men, and you'd set up your play and then you'd hit the buzzer. And as soon as the bottoms touched, the guy was down at that point, and would play it for hours and keep stats and just completely nerd out about something we both, close to the same age, grew up loving. Played flag football with him. Always ran into him at the movie house. We wouldn't even say we were going, but he loved going to movies. I'd take my daughters or just some movie I was going to by myself. Doing shows with him was really, because he was funny. He had a certain way about the way he did it, because a lot of those shows were really late at night. The old school ones, you're there till 3 and 4 in the morning, and he would just lie back in his chair and kind of like meditate, and then pop up and have all the electricity that you all know him for. But before every show, he'd turn to you and say, "It's time to get stupid. Like, let's be silly, let's have fun." And I know I'm just touching on a whole bunch of things, but he meant a lot to a lot of us, and I like that he still has an impact. He's gone, but still has a huge impact. People love talking about him, and the money that's being raised for cancer research, and it goes on and on. So yeah.
Well, you want to talk about iconic taglines? I mean, cool as the other side of the pillow.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if there's ever one that's going to top that.
Yeah, because everybody knows the meaning, right? All right, next one was for all of you three. You sort of already touched on it, but if you have something to add about the digital card collecting space, what's the latest? Where's it going?
Yeah, I can take that one. I'm sure Jeff could take that one as well. People are spending a lot of their life online, and they're building personas online, and they have a whole kind of active social life online. And we're seeing a lot of the things that people do offline make their way into an online space because of that. So we've talked a lot about, people building stories about things they love, people wanting connections with athletes, and people being natural collectors. I would argue that humans are collectors since kind of the dawn of mankind. And so it's natural for it to move into an online space, and it's become big business. It's big business for us. It's big business for the NBA, and we're not even out of beta with them yet. It's big business for Topps and for the Garbage Pail Kids project. So I think we're going to see more and more of this, where it matters to people to showcase their fandom, and it matters to people to collect. And now you can do that online. And for us, blockchain is the thing that makes that scarce, that makes it real, that makes it more like a physical good than a digital good. We've got like a little kind of chart, like what's the difference between, buying a skin on Fortnite and buying an NBA Top Shot moment. And the difference is that a Top Shot is really like a physical trading card, and a skin is something that sits on a game and can disappear in a second. One of the things that's most interesting about the projects that are happening in the blockchain space is that if you sold that Fortnite skin, you'd be in violation of their terms of service. You'd be doing something wrong. In the games that we build, you're explicitly asked to participate in the secondary market. You can't even get everything you want from a pack. You have to go to other people. You have to do trading. You have to participate in the community. And we build the marketplaces to do that. And so in that way, there is some speculation and there is some investment. But I think we expect it to, there's kind of no limit to where this industry can go. It's really, really in its infancy, and we're just starting to see platforms that can even support, you know, fan base sizes, the size of the NBA or the sizes of MLB fans. And so it's really, really early, but also the people who own cards this early are going to own some really, really rare, really, really interesting stuff. So I think the people who are starting to get involved in it know that and are really excited by it.
Yeah, I'll just touch quickly, real quick, Kenny. I mean, I think, you know, two things on that. I think we're going to continue to see the physical trading cards kind of go into the digital space. So I think the things that everyone loves about physical trading cards will continue to go and be highlighted even more in the digital space, potentially even what Phil's doing as far as, you know, case breaking and doing that kind of stuff. And I think too, the memorabilia, we talked a little bit about autographs, but even game used memorabilia, you can put on the blockchain and you can assign ownership to that in a digital space. I think you'll see more and more of that in the future.
Going to the physical cards, maybe more for Phil and Jeff. The writer, I'm not sure if the premise is true or untrue, I don't know the answer. Are younger people not as enthusiastic right now as say they were, you know, 40 years ago, 50 years ago when I was young? Is that even true? And if it is true, what are you doing to engage them? I know, you know, Phil doing entertaining stuff on YouTube is one way. Like, is that a problem? And you're like, oh my God, we need to capture this young audience so there won't be one later in 20 years.
Yeah, no, I think that, and I think what the question kind of alluded to is true in some ways, that physical cards were kind of not as interesting to the younger generation that's, you know, very into video games and, you know, has their whole lives online. But I think the aspect of, you know, parents getting their kids involved in something that was nostalgic to them is very much, you know, kind of driving the force of physical cards being appealing to the younger kids. And I've certainly found that a lot of, you know, my audience on YouTube tends to kind of fall into the, you know, 30 to 40-year-old male kind of aspect. But I've found that since I've been on for, you know, almost a year now, there is a younger audience that's more and more interested because they want something to connect with their dads or their moms, or they want something that they can touch and feel that feels a lot different from what they're used to with, you know, an online community. And I know that, you know, everything's kind of going digital, but I think there's a balance in which we can still have, you know, physical cards and something that, you know, hangs in your room, rather than something that you have to go on a computer to look at. I think that, you know, we can exist, you know, both of those things together. So
yeah. I mean, it's no different. I love reading books, like physically holding a book in my hand, but I also use the internet. Like, you know, it's almost the same parallel.
Yeah, I think, Kenny, just to touch on that quickly. I mean, I think from the 70s and 80s, 40 years ago, I mean, trading cards were massive. I mean, I was a kid in the 80s. They were the form of social currency. You'd ride over to your friend's house and open packs and go to the local shops and get them, have them in your binders. Everyone remember, we talked about stories earlier. Everyone remembers stories of great trades they had with friends, or, you know, you fleeced your friend on a future Hall of Famer or something like that. So I think video games and some other digital things have probably replaced trading cards to an extent. But I will say that the number of kids and the, you know, the marketplace that we have of people collecting has skewed a lot younger, even in the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, I've talked to a few people that have been in their teens that in 2014 probably wouldn't have collected, that now are collecting, whether they've got into it through Pokemon, whether they're following their favorite sports league, whether there's an investment potential into it, whether it's just something like TikTok or YouTube and they're into that and they're seeing cards pop up in those different spaces. So, you know, we always at Topps are thinking about how can we continue to keep kids engaged, right? We got to keep getting that next generation engaged, because my father, you know, people of that generation, you know, they get older and older, and you got to keep passing down the memories and the experiences to keep it relevant in people's lives. So it's something we're focused on. Digital is a way, but as Phil said, physical is not ever going to go away. When I first started at Topps, it was like, oh, the world's moving digital, trading cards has to go digital. I think to an extent that's true, but I don't think physical will ever go away. That experience of holding a card, trading with your friends, having that sense of the stories you talked about, Kenny, whether it's you meeting Muhammad Ali or someone coming up to Phil at a game in 2010 and getting him to sign a card. Those stories are not going to go away.
Those stories haven't, though, even in the work that we're doing where it's all digital, where like I have stories about definitely getting fleeced by my coworkers just because I was being friendly about trading, and like there's all sorts of like the same kind of stories that you had as a kid are still happening in a digital space. They're just happening globally. So I'm now getting fleeced by a kid in Japan instead of, you know, a kid in my neighborhood. But I can't believe it was like 5 minutes to the end of this before esports came up, because if you think about something like esports, for people who are fans of esports, there are amazing things that happen in every one of those games, and those things really are digital. So when you think about digital first trading cards, that market is going to be enormous, and it's going to be really fun for people to collect, you know, kills and other things that happen in games that they love, and to feel connected to esports athletes in that way as well, where you can have something that you know is tied to something that, you know, somebody you love who plays video games did.
Phil, were you going to say something?
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to touch on was, and I feel like we haven't brought this up at all, is the something called TTM, or through the mail autographs. And I found that the biggest kind of demographic for that is younger kids. They find, you know, a base card of a guy they like, and they send it in to the spring training facility or the stadium. And, you know, the thrill of getting that card back and getting a piece of mail in your box, and it's like, oh, this guy sent this card back to me. I found that some of the youngest kids in the space are so into that, because first of all, it doesn't cost a lot of money. You know, you have the card, you put a stamp on it, and you can send it in. But it keeps, you know, the interest going in cards where, you know, maybe kids don't have a lot of money to spend on, you know, boxes or packs, but they have a few cards of guys they like laying around, and they can send them in and try to get them sent back on and, you know, autographed by the player.
Well, I think we took it to the hour. We can bring our leader back in. You guys were great. I brought you electric football and random weird memorabilia I have autographed in my basement somewhere. But it was fun. Thank you for having me. And tonight, Top's YouTube channel, right, Jeff? 8 o'clock Eastern.
Yeah, Kenny. I'm not going to give away what happens, but it's entertaining. Watch.
So first of all, thank you guys. What a fun conversation. I took some notes, so I guess it's time to get stupid. I'm going to read a few of them. So Phil, first of all, good luck. Love the way you named your son Harrison, and hope you continue to get some great success with Phil's Polls. Check out Phil's Polls on YouTube. Yeah, quite a bit of good stuff there. Jeff, thank you really for pulling this group together. I think the best way perhaps we pull this group together is we take Kenny's wiffle ball with Ken Griffey Jr. on it. We get Katie to authenticate it. Then we give it to Phil. He'll pitch. I'll swing and miss. And then, Jeff, you can sell it. Maybe that's the way we do it.
Yes.
So that could be some fun. Katie, I love that you worked Sabonis into the conversation. I think you might be our first panelist that became the moderator at one point, and then went back to panelist and went back to moderator. So the next time we do this, maybe you'll take the role of moderator full time, and that could be some fun. And then Kenny, you know, you definitely win the award for the best background. I think you're definitely killing it with that hammock in the background and the fresh air. Personally, I just wanted to thank you for all the nights you put me to sleep with the Feel Good edition and everything thereafter on SportsCenter. So I'm excited to bring sports back safely and watch you downplay everything from that ball's about 500 feet long, and if it's fair, it's a home run, and if it's foul, it's strike two. So that's a good downplay, I think, was my favorite.
Friday night, I'll do it again.
And then, yeah, I played metal football with my dad as a kid. So thanks for bringing it back. It's not what it used to be, by the way. Those guys you bought the game now. They just go in circles.
Yeah, you gotta train them
like they used to.
Or the electrical cord breaks and you have to like tap on the machine to make them go. So people need to investigate that. Great game.
Yeah. So thank you guys all. Truly, I promise I'll
Thank
let
you
by 2 o'clock. And thank you to all the guys in the background, the team at LiveLike for putting all the fun stuff together, the polls, the sentiment analysis, all of it. And everyone be safe, be healthy. It's a crazy time in our lives. I like to end our segments with one simple comment, which is our goal is to bring this community together. So please support our leagues, our teams, our athletes, our broadcasters, our publishers, our brands, agencies, partners, entrepreneurs, and investors. We are one team. Sports never stop. Fans never stop. So be creative, be innovative, and be safe. And thank you guys.
Boy,
Register to
thank
vote.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.